probably thinking about, okay, what are you going to do with your current offering, or how are you going to make sure that you develop new offerings that is going to be relevant for your clients now. All right, great. Thank you so much for filling that in, guys. I think that was a really interesting insight, and we're definitely going to go back to that. I actually want to zoom into your answers concerning the effects on the different parts of your businesses. And then highlight one or two parts of your business or steps that you can take to mitigate, and in some instances, even completely turn the situation around. All right, so let's get started. It's quite interesting to see that it was a very low number, I believe around 11, 17% of people mentioned that people is something that has been a major, have been majorly impacted the past few weeks. And as I often say, you know, with no people, you have no business. People are your human capital. They are, in many cases, invaluable to the success of your business. And in this particular crisis, there are a number of ways this can affect your teams. For many of us, our whole lives have been turned upside down. And the fact that as a business owner or a director or a CEO, you have the incredible difficult task of trying to navigate these storms while trying to keep most of your employees on board. And for some of us, it's not going to be possible. This takes too long to keep those people in. But before you start laying off staff, if you haven't already, and if you had to, you know, this is understandable. There are a few steps that you can take, or at least explore and look at. So if you're continuing your operations while working from home, the last thing that you want is for your team and for your top performance to start disengaging, right? And slack behind. So by far the most effective way to deal with this is to establish daily check-ins or daily huddles. This is going to form a form of team alliance. It's going to make sure that everybody is aligned for the same purpose every day, doing the same thing in their own little area of expertise to increase productivity and get results. And obviously high productivity focused and centered, well thought out productivity equals cash, could equal cash. The second thing that I'd like to advise on the people matter is to reevaluate the roles within the company. So if one of your team members is really stepping up during this time, showing initiative during this time, showing and revealing skills that you didn't even know they possessed, that they mastered. There is probably no better time than now to strategically position those, I would say, hidden gems within your team with all their innovative ideas and skill sets to actually push the company forward. So a number of you guys spoke about your business model, or at least your current market strategy. If you are not sure whether your business can survive, not only the peak of the crisis, but also in a new business climate and probably highly disrupted market that you're operational in, please make note of the following real life example in this very crisis that I'm going to give you and provide you with. And hopefully you will apply some of these learnings to your own business and mitigate and change some things around, turn some things around. So the example I want to give you is actually from a media and cosmetics company that was forced to close 40% of their stores during this crisis, including all of its locations in Wuhan, which we know, was at some point the epicenter of the crisis. And rather than laying off their staff that was working in these branches, they actually decided to redeploy all the 125 staff members that were operating these branches and turned them into beauty advisors / influencers online. What they did is they set them up They provided them with, training on influencing, cracking up their profiles on WeChat and Instagram and things like that. And they were able to engage our customers continuously, virtually, and drive online sales. As a result, the sales in Wuhan, remember the epicenter of the crisis, where they had to close 40% of their stores, achieved over 200% growth in sales. And that is compared to at least 5 years of their previous sales numbers. So what can we learn from this? I think a lot. I believe that one of the things that we really need to take into account is that whatever we decide today, short term, is going to have long-term effects. Whether it's a good decision, whether it's a bad decision, whether it's you're not sure what kind of decision you have to make. If you're deciding to let staff go today, that is going to obviously have implications for later. And so try to make sure that in your strategy, you don't only look at, okay, how can we make sure that the brand is still alive after we're here? How can we look at making sure that the brand comes out stronger? How can we look at us actually accessing, operating on different levels, trying to find audiences in places that we weren't previously engaging with? And so now the use of your people and the branding that you're doing is going to be very focused. And with focus and concentration comes a lot of opportunity. So instead of thinking about, I've closed my shops, obviously I cannot pay these people. Think like, one of the business example that I gave now, and say, okay, what can we do with the people now that they can't physically go to the store? So obviously cash was one of the major topics that came up that people are concerned about, people are struggling with, that was affected mostly. So I can assume that some of these, the reasons that this was mentioned a lot is because you've seen a reduction in your revenue stream. So you've seen, maybe some of you have completely stopped getting any form of numbers in. And it depends also, obviously, what industry you're in. But before you do anything else, one of the most important and valuable pieces of advice of crisis management experts, and that I personally can give you, is to look at the resources that you already have in your business and take a step back. Dive back into the market and find out what changes you can play on as a business. So how do you do that? I'll give you a great example of a local corporate lunch delivery service here in Amsterdam that went from servicing hundreds of offices, and they're one of my clients in the city of Amsterdam, to zero in a matter of hours. So they went, the announcement was made, we're going on lockdown tonight. And that was it. All the offices were shut down, and they knew that come Monday, this was on Friday, come Monday, their main source of business was gone. And so they spent the whole weekend, all of us were brainstorming, we're thinking about how can we make this into something that is an opportunity for us? Because we already have all of this stock, we already have all of these supplies, we already have all these orders lined up. What are we going to do now that we cannot deliver these services to the offices? And what they came up with, actually we're taking credit, what they came up with is within a week, contacted all their clients and agreed to deliver all the lunches individually to the employees' homes. But they didn't even leave it at that. While they were brainstorming, they realized that most families were now home with their kids, homeschooling kids, working from home. And they would probably be in the position that they don't have time, or for convenience sake, whatever reason, there's more opportunity to be delivering to people at home. So they actually added to their offering now the client base, that is the family business. So now they were offering not only individual lunch boxes to their clients, employees, they were now also sending out lunch boxes and complete lunches to family members. So they stabilized their revenue, and they were able to tap into a whole new market. generating new revenue streams. So this is something that I really want to take, give away with you. So crisis is opportunity. Definitely, there are going to be instances where you're going to encounter losses. You're going to have to make tough decisions. There's going to be cutbacks. But the bigger picture is this: if you can find for your business, or maybe outside of your industry, opportunity in things that are now going to be important for people, things that are now going to be important for the company, that are going to be of increased relevance for us, for the next generation to come. That is, I believe, where you can build in your strategy real sustainability, that you are going to ensure for yourself, at least for the next 10, 20, 30 years, your relevance. So looking at market trends, where they're headed, where we came from, but also what is happening now, and identifying those things that you can play on, I believe is going to be key in whatever you decide to take your business on in terms of direction. And I've listed a few opportunities. There are many more, but I believe that especially in local manufacturing, there's a huge opportunity, not only for the sake of us having job creation, right here in Ghana, being able to instantly ramp up a factory and start creating things that we are going to need on a day-to-day basis, that is made here for us, by us. That's the kind of cycle that we want to build in our economy and in our ecosystem. So look at opportunities that are going to last, not only your business, but are going to make a sustainable long-term impact on our economy. So wrapping up, I'd like to challenge each and every one of you today to take a step back and to look at how you can focus on the things that you possibly can with your business. Because if history has shown us one thing, is that within every crisis lies opportunity if you are ready and willing to step out of your comfort zone and make a difference. So if you are looking to get a clear picture of where you are standing as a business today and what steps to take, I have a leadership checklist for you guys that my team at ScaleUp Company have set up that we use in crisis management consultations. And the team of ScaleUp Africa will be sending this over to you after this session, and you'll be able to look at that. And I challenge you to schedule a time in your calendar this week to go over the checklist, prioritize those first steps, organize a team around it, share and collaborate with other businesses to increase impact. And let's make something happen. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for sharing your thoughts on those very, very pertinent areas that I think everybody would be very interested to learn more about. And as Kimberly said, we'll be able to share the presentation with you at the end of this webinar. I'm going to quite nicely forward, if there are any questions and answers, this is the right time to start asking any specific questions you have. So please share your questions over so we're able to assist. We have a number of, we have one particular one that's just come through. Says, how does the company practically pivot during this time?
So interesting question. Thank you for that. So pivoting really means going back to square one and looking at what is it that the market needs instead of what do we have right now that we can adjust. So pivoting really means we are going an entirely different direction, probably. Because we are now going to align with what the market needs. So practically that means looking at the industry that you are in, the specific market that you have set out that you are operational in, and then looking at their behaviors. What has changed? What are the new resources that they are going to need? What are some of the resources that they are no longer needing? How do you play into this with your offering? Are you offering anything that is relevant, or are your services no longer relevant for that industry? So asking yourself all of these practical questions will enable you to get to a place where you are now setting up new business models that could potentially turn around the focus of the business, and that therefore pivoting.
Thank you so much. I hope to the your name is lots of A's and B's and G's and Q's, and so whomever you are, thank you so much for sharing your question. I hope that's given you enough food for thought. The next question says, are there any examples from African-owned businesses on how they successfully managed the crisis? And that's from Alice Abrokwa.
Well, I believe that there, and I believe the rest of the team can also tap into that, but I believe that there are many examples. Unfortunately, not a lot of those are getting the publicity that they need. But I do see an overall trend, without mentioning any particular names that I can recall, is that there are a lot of companies that are tapping into their current resources and helping to provide especially, like, let's say in the digital diagnostics industry. In Ghana, Redbird has launched its self-check-in resources app. So now, not only have they decided to make an impact and participate and partake in being part of the solution, they're probably also going to gain a lot from this afterwards as a brand, and maybe also in business. There is this other platform that is called Cocoa Networks. And they actually recalibrated its supply chain, which spans across India and Kenya, to convert ethanol for cooking fuel to sanitation products as part of a large-scale collaboration to avert a humanitarian crisis. So they were tapping into, again, to the things that they were already doing. They already had these resources, but now they changed their offering and their focus, and to also help communities while they were doing that.
So I literally said all of that's muted. The other question was from Isaac Aqua, and he says, do you think the restaurants you mentioned will keep its new business model after the lockdown ends, or revert back to its original business model? Interesting question.
So as far as I am concerned, they will add this to their portfolio, because how I believe the market is going to look like now is that businesses are going to reevaluate who actually needs to be in the office every day, right? So they're going to look at, okay, do we actually need this skyscraper of a building, or can we work with less square meters because now people can be working from home? Can we go into shared working spaces? So now what I believe the business has already done, and we haven't even thought about it that way, is probably the longer term effects of people being able to work from home and being more acceptable. You'll be able to agree and put it as one of your benefits. You know, if you work for us, you get lunch at home. So that's something that is definitely still going to be relevant afterwards. And then again, when you look at the business, the family delivery, I don't know, it's still going to be something that people are now introduced to and are going to become accustomed to. And so I can only assume that it's going to be a growing demand of services like this, especially if we are taking it back to when to the fact that more people are going to start working from home because their bosses are allowing it, or because they have experienced it as something positive. And also out of convenience, you know, we are already having a lot of food deliveries. Why not have an already set lunch for yourself once a week?
That's really great insight. Thank you so much for sharing. I think I'm conscious of time, and so if there are any further questions, we can collate those and connect you with Kimberly Ofori, as well as share her presentation with you. I'd like to quite neatly kind of move over and just say thank you so much, Kimberly. I know you're need to go off on another meeting, so thank you so much. If you're able to stay with us, great. If not, we truly appreciate your time. And as said, we'll share any further questions from the participants with you so we can carry on this very interesting conversation.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'm going to nicely move on to Kofi. So again, thanks so much for joining us and sharing all of your amazing insights. I'm going to share my screen with you and allow you to take over afterwards. Go. Hope you can see this. I'm going to make this slightly bigger. Okay. So let me know when you want me to. Okay, wait, let me take you off here first. Sorry. Sorry. Kofi, I think I've muted you by mistake. I'm going to try and unmute you in a moment. 1 second. Let's see. Where are you? Oh no, I think no, Kofi, I've actually I have no control over your muteness. Okay.
Okay. I think that's sorted out now.
Great.
Thanks, Olivia. Thanks, Kimberly. Can we have it in full screen?
There we go. Okay.
Okay, thanks. So good morning, everybody. First slide, please. Okay, so this is the outline of this presentation, my brief presentation. I'll do an introduction talking about where we are now and possibly what things would look like once we come out of this recession. And then I will give you two case studies, two companies. One is AMSCO, the operation of AMSCO in East Africa, looking specifically at how AMSCO handled the 2008-2009 recession. And then I'll look at a company based in Ghana called ARDHI Investment Group and look at what measures they have put in place. ARDHI is a startup. Look at what measures they have put in place now to thrive, to survive and thrive through the current crisis. And then we'll look at lessons that we can draw from the two companies, 4 lessons that we can draw from the two companies. And then I'll take questions from you. So if we can go to the first slide.
Do you want me to unlock all of them?
According to many economists, yes, please, if we can do all of them then. According to many economists, the global economy was overheating and possibly heading towards a recession even before the coronavirus pandemic hit. So the pandemic has basically just pushed us into a recession that was expected anytime soon. As business owners, I think from Kimberly's presentation, we saw notice a number of you're asking yourselves a number of questions that you really should be asking yourselves as business owners. How is this recession going to affect your business? Is it going to survive the recession? How is it going to affect your employees? That is very important. What are the assumptions behind your business plan? Are those assumptions still valid? How is the recession going to affect your customers' buying behavior, their purchasing behaviors? And then beyond surviving the recession, how do you position your business to thrive into the future? I think Kimberly did quite a good job handling that. Now, the effect of this recession will affect different sectors differently. What we're going to see is that the low-touch sectors will be less adversely affected than the high-touch sectors, not tech-touch. So your low-touch sectors would be sectors like your e-commerce sectors, online gaming, online education, remote conferencing. Sectors like those will be less affected negatively than your high-touch sectors. Those would be sectors like your hospitality sector, travel, tourism, movie theaters, nightclubs. Most sports are going to be adversely impacted by this crisis. Then it will also affect different businesses or different economies differently. Your gold producers, economies that have a strong gold production sector will benefit, or should benefit from this. Healthcare, pharmaceutical sectors, countries that have those should benefit. Countries that are oil producers will take a hit. I think I saw, was it this morning or yesterday, that certain futures prices for oil were actually negative. They're actually paying you to buy oil, so it's going to be very interesting. This recession will, however, also be a little different from other recessions, previous recessions. Now, typically in recessions, because this recession is being triggered largely by a health crisis, this time service companies will likely bear the brunt of the recession. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yep.
So these are just some forecasts from some of the development partners. The UNDP is expecting that developing countries will take a hit of $220 billion. The World Bank is forecasting a fall in GDP growth rates from 2.4% in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, that is, from 2.4% in last year to between negative 2.1 to negative 5.1% this year. The African Union is predicting that up to 20 million jobs will be lost in Africa because of this pandemic. So the impact is going to be great. But what does the future look like? Can we, next slide, please? So one of the things that we can expect as the pandemic continues, as we get out of the pandemic, is that nationalism will increase. Import substitution is going to be increased in many countries, if not all countries. And that is because the global supply chains have been affected. They've been impacted. Trade is still going on, but at a much lower level than it was before. For countries that have tourism sectors, large tourism sectors, foreign tourists are not going to be coming in. So there's going to be an encouragement of local tourism. That should be expected. And then agriculture should see a boost as well. Like I said, we'll be talking about ARDHI investment group, which is into agriculture. But agriculture should see a boost because the food production value chains, the international chains, are going to be affected. They have been affected in many countries, and that is bound to continue. We also will probably see periodic lockdowns over the next 2 years. The pandemic is likely to hit us in waves, as pandemics have done in the past. The last major pandemic was the Spanish flu pandemic from 1918 to 1920. It hits the world in at least 3 waves over about a year. So if the COVID-19 pandemic follows the same playbook, what we can expect is that each wave will result in border closures and lockdowns. So we'll see that, I would expect that we'll see that happening frequently. We can also expect to see less international travel as the pandemic continues and until we have a vaccine for it. International travel is going to be severely impacted. I mean, think about it. If every international trip you take requires a 14-day quarantine, who's going to travel on business or pleasure? You really cannot do that. So until we have antibodies and until vaccines are developed, it's very likely that international travel is going to be severely impacted. We're going to see also that many businesses will collapse. There's going to be a lot of businesses collapsing. And for those businesses that survive them, what it means is that there will be fewer competitors for you to battle it out with. Kimberly talked about remote working becoming more commonplace. That is definitely going to be the case, I think, even if people go back into the offices, because companies are going to survive this period through remote working. It's going to be seen as a realistic thing. And so businesses will
Okay, guys, we'll try and get Kofi back. I think he's lost his connection. But we'd encourage you to post a few more questions on the chat so we can address those at the end of the call. So let's get some feedback on the chat. Is this practical for you? Has this been helpful? Let's get some feedback from you guys. Kofi's back. But please do post your comments and your questions on the chat. Kofi, you're on mute. Olivia, maybe you can check. Okay, Kofi, do you want to try one more time to unmute yourself?
I can't actually see Kofi on my screen. Kofi, can you hear us? Wait.
You can hear us, yeah, but...
Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Okay. At what point did you lose me?
Yeah, fewer competitors, and a lot of businesses will fail, but there'll be fewer competitors, so it's an advantage and an opportunity for SMEs.
It is an opportunity. Okay, so then the next point was there was what Kimberly made, which is that remote working is going to become more and more acceptable and more commonplace because companies have seen that this works during this period, and so companies will be more willing to embrace it. So can we go to the next slide, please? So then we will also see that e-commerce will receive a boost. It's one of the sectors that companies are moving to in order to survive this. It's a low touch point opportunity for companies to reach their clients. So the e-commerce should see a boost. Hygiene requirements are also going to become more common. And I think that we're going to have a situation where hygiene can be a differentiating factor. If you need to visit the spa, if you need to visit the barber, the salon, you probably would want to know that the person you're dealing with, the person taking care of you, has been vaccinated for COVID-19. So I think that for a while we're going to see that hygiene will be a differentiating factor. High unemployment is going to be common as well. It's something that we're going to see a lot of. Companies are going to let people go. Unfortunately, I think Kimberly touched on what to do to avert that, or to try averting that. And then we're going to see innovative applications of technology. China, after the pandemic hit, what China did, or some of what China did, was using infrared, putting infrared into police officers' headgear, their masks. So police officers could look at people and tell who had a high fever, who had a fever. Without even talking to you, without pointing a thermometer at you from a distance, they could immediately tell who had a high fever. So we're going to see things like that happening a lot more. And then, unfortunately, we are also probably going to see governments become more assertive. One of the things that we are realizing now is that a lot of our rights that we hold dear can be suspended for higher reasons. And so the right of assembly, which is guaranteed in a lot of countries, in a lot of constitutions, the right of assembly is no longer, it's not an absolute right. It's been suspended very easily by governments, and nobody can reasonably complain about it. So we're going to see governments become more assertive, locking down countries, taking people in, if it gets really bad, taking people into forceful quarantine. That is going to happen more and more frequently, unfortunately. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look at two case studies, like I said. The first is AMSCO in Kenya. AMSCO actually had offices around different countries, but we'll be looking specifically at AMSCO in Kenya and how they survived the Great Recession of 2008 and its aftermath. So between 2008 and 2011. And for full disclosure, I was the one running AMSCO in Kenya during that period. So I'll be talking about things that I did and my thought process. Then we'll look also at ARDHI Ghana, that's a key investment group in Ghana, how they are positioning themselves right now to thrive through COVID-19 and the accompanying recession. So starting with AMSCO, next slide, please. Starting with AMSCO, AMSCO is into development, or was into development advisory services. Its key stakeholders were governments, development agencies, different development agencies, and the private sector. And the key countries that AMSCO Kenya operated in were Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. There were operations in other countries, but these three were the key countries. All of the company's business functions were in-house, except for PR and legal. Those were outsourced. And the company had a high cash flow operation. Lots of money flowed in, but a lot of money flowed out as well. Next slide, please. So what did we see as AMSCO Kenya? The first thing, very important point, is that in 2008, Kenya was not hit firstly by the recession. Kenya was hit by a post-election violence. And that was the big problem of 2008 in Kenya. The election was in December 2017, and the violence began in very late in December 2017, early into December 2019. So the business environment in Kenya deteriorated because of the post-election violence. The recession then hit, and the impact of the recession was felt more from 2009. So for AMSCO Kenya, we were able to see in 2008, we were able to see the recession coming because it had hit in other countries. We could see it coming. As we dealt with the post-election violence, we were able to put things in place for the recession as well. We figured out from our discussions and from talking to our partners that governments, who were one of our key stakeholders, governments were going to be more interested in partners, in their development partners, advisors, who can give them loans and grants, as opposed to an organization like AMSCO that brings technical capability. The governments were more interested in people bringing money. And then we also expected that there will be a high default rate from our clients because our clients were mainly SMEs. So if they are impacted by the recession, their default rates will go higher. We sought to understand a number of things. Firstly, how was this recession going to hit the different economies, the different countries that we were operating in? What will be the potential impact of the recession on each country? When will it hit? Then we looked also at the liquidity profiles of our different client segments. We worked with clients in different segments, SMEs, medium-sized companies, a few large companies. We worked with companies in the hospitality industry, financial sector, etc. So we tried to figure out what the liquidity profile of each sector was so that we could target more effectively the more liquid sectors. And then we also reached out and identified and built relationships with key influencers in the different economies, influencers from the private sector in the different economies, because we needed to be able to reach government. That was to counter the government's lack of interest in technical skills at that point. Next slide. So we took a number of specific actions. The first action we took was to rationalize our service offering. The company had three service lines or business lines. The first was secondment, which was where we actually seconded technical experts into businesses to carry out specific mandates. They turn around the business, run the business, expand into a new market, whatever it is. We seconded technical experts into those businesses. That was the largest business that we had. The business was our training and development line, which was, your typical training and development, looking for opportunities to run training programs within our client companies, but also to the public. And the third was recruitment, which was, that's self-explanatory. For each one of those, we looked, for the business lines, we looked to understand which of our business lines brings in the most actual cash inflow. It's not which one is booking revenue, but which one is actually giving us the cash. Then we looked also at which one requires the least cost to generate increased cash flow. Because at the time, in times of recession, your focus should shift from revenue, from profitability to cash flow. So we're looking for the business that will bring in the cash and which required the least cost to generate additional cash flow. And that was the second-main business. That was the cash cow of AMSCO. So we took so we continued with our actions after identifying that. We reviewed the service model. Now, AMSCO, because of the structure of the organization, the service model could not be changed. The service delivery model could not be changed. However, we could improve on the delivery processes. So once we identified that we couldn't change our model, we focused on improving the processes. So for example, the time to invoice, which is the time from when we received a client's application to the time to when we actually invoice the client, we cut that down by 33%. We needed to go through multiple approval stages, and we still maintained the approval stages, but we managed to cut down the time to invoicing by 33%. We also did other things, including cross-selling, etc. I'll talk a bit more about some of the other things we did, but we basically looked at how we could improve the service delivery model, the service delivery process for AMSCO in Kenya. Then we also looked for opportunities to expand. Well, we didn't specifically go out looking for those, but when they came to us, we grabbed them, we assessed them, and we grabbed them. Now, expanding needs to be done very carefully because, again, you don't want to tie your money up going into a difficult new market, trying to develop the market during a recession. We were fortunate that an opportunity arose to go into a new market. And the market already had a number of clients that were ready, looking for us, looking to work with us. The costs, therefore, to get started in the market were going to be very minimal. But it was going to give us a new flow of revenue, a new stream that was always welcome. We had support from the stakeholders to get going in that market. So we grabbed that opportunity as quickly as possible. We grabbed that opportunity and we moved into that market. Having said that, there were two other markets that seemingly had good opportunities. But when we did the assessments of those markets, what we realized was that the opportunities were going to be expensive to actually exploit, to develop and to get a business going. Those were going to be quite expensive. It would take a lot of time and money. And so we suspended those. We didn't take up those opportunities. The fourth point, next slide, please. So the next thing we did was to look at how we could protect our cash flow. We looked at a number of things. Firstly, I've touched on them, the product mix, focusing on the cash cow, shortening the time to invoice, that's the service delivery. We looked also at the expansion. All of those were aimed at protecting our cash flow. Then we did a couple of things. We implemented a policy of taking deposits from our larger clients. It was always a policy, but it was something that was not implemented. We actually started asking for deposits. Most of the clients were unable to pay deposits to us. It didn't stop us from working with them, but a number of them paid deposits. And so we had that money coming in, and this was money that was going to lie down idle with us. We're not paying any interest on it. It was going to lie with us for 2 to 3 years. We jumped at that opportunity and we grabbed that money. We also postponed capital expenditure. I recall there was a point when I had to drive from Nairobi in Kenya to Kisumu in Western Kenya, and most of the road was really bad. The road was under construction, and I had to go in a 12-year-old Nissan Patrol. Drove in one day, had my meetings, spent the night, drove back the next morning, and I can tell you this: I really, really felt older than I am. My bones were aching everywhere, simply because we did not want to buy a new car. We did not want to. We kept that old vehicle for, I think, about 3 or 4 more years. We kept that old vehicle. So we postponed the capital expenditure where we could. We leased equipment when necessary, as opposed to buying them. We had a number of printers in the office, which we leased. Instead of buying a printer, we would lease a printer. Next point, please. Next point. And then we also renegotiated some of our budgets, our overhead budgets, the PR activity budget. We took our PR company off a retainer, similar with the law firm. We took them off retainers and paid them per activity. So the PR company was also a small company, but we maintained our business with them. Although we changed the structure of our business with them, we maintained the business with them. We looked at our overheads and also amended, saw how we could adjust that. I recall one particular item was telephone bills, our cell phone bills, which each employee had a cell phone allowance. We basically halved the allowances, the monthly allowance to each employee, but we started assessing the usage over a quarterly period, and simply because we realized that some employees would exceed their limit in 1 month, but then they will fall below it in another month. So we started looking at it over a quarterly period, and the budget for that dropped. And unfortunately, the reality with budgets, with expense budgets, is that a lot of people look at them as expense targets. So by dropping the budget, cutting the budget in half, the cost, our cell phone bills, the cost just dropped significantly. Now you will note next, not slide, but next two, yeah. So you'll notice from this that the actions we took were in two groups. We took actions to increase the inflows, but we took actions also to reduce the outflows. And that is how you need to look at your cash flow in times of a recession. You need to increase your inflows and reduce your outflows. So take actions that specifically address those 2 points. So what was the effect on for what we did with AMSCO? Next point, next slide. Immediately in 2008, no, please, previous slide. Immediately in 2008, what we saw was a dip in our revenue and our bottom line. That was to be expected with the post-election violence, etc. There was a dip in that, but we saw a cumulative growth beginning in 2009. So even when the recession hit in Kenya, we did begin to grow our business. So there was a growth in revenue, a growth in the bottom line, beginning from 2009 through to onwards to 2014 when I left that operation. Most of the cost management measures that we implemented in 2008 continued beyond the recession. And the business was positioned to explode out of the blocks when the recession effects receded. So the effects of the recession receded in 2011, thereabouts. In 2012 alone, the revenue of that unit grew by about 60% in 1 year. It grew by 60%. Because we had taken a lot of measures whilst the recession was ongoing to position the business to grow. Okay. So now let's go on to ARDHI quickly and let's see what ARDHI did. So ARDHI is a company that it's an agribusiness. Their primary function is growing premium tomatoes and cucumbers. They're based in Ghana, but they also are into selling and training users of greenhouses. So they grow in greenhouses. Their major customer segment is supermarkets, your ShopRite, Game, etc. Now these are typically excellent customers for a farm, but in times of recessions, they can be tricky because they typically will only pay you after you have sold, after your products have sold on the shelf. So they will receive the products, and then what sells is what they will pay you. So ARDHI maintains a lot of functions in-house, but they also have outsourced certain functions like their marketing function and their HR function. Next slide. So what does ARDHI see in the market now? When they look at the market in Ghana now, what ARDHI sees is that there will be a prolonged lockdown or frequent lockdowns in Ghana. I think that is realistic. They also expect a deep recession, which is also very realistic. But they also are seeing that their routes to market may frequently be compromised. This is because firstly, ARDHI is outside Accra. But as there are lockdowns, what happened in Ghana over the last 3 weeks was that there were lockdowns of certain towns, certain cities in Ghana. It wasn't a countrywide lockdown. So there will be some compromise to routes of markets. And then they expect a negative impact on their cash flow and their profitability. What they pointed out to me, and I was really glad to hear this, is that they are not focused so much on profitability now. Their focus is on cash flow, which is, again, the right thing to do during a recession, or if you are anticipating a recession. So what they sought to understand a number of things. Firstly, they sought to understand their key customers. What are their locations, their buying patterns, and their payment patterns? Then they looked at their consumers. So their key customers are not their consumers, right? The customers are the supermarkets. The supermarkets don't consume tomatoes. It's the households that consume tomatoes. So their consumers are different from the customers. So the consumers, they looked at those as well. Middle-income households, what are their buying and payment patterns? They understood that. Then they looked again at alternative customers. These are aggregators, companies or businesses that that would take an order from a household for different vegetables. They will buy vegetables from different vendors, and they will aggregate those vegetables. So they might buy cabbage from one vendor, tomatoes from another, onions from a third vendor. But they will aggregate it for a household and deliver to the household for a fee. So ARDHI looked at the aggregators. They are looking at aggregators as well. And then they are looking at traders in the market, going straight to the traders in the market as well. Then they looked also at the links between their expectations of what is going to happen in Ghana and the patterns of the patterns that they have identified. And from that, ARDHI then took the decision to implement a number of interesting measures. Next slide. Next slide, please. So one of the first things ARDHI did was to rationalize their product offering. ARDHI, like I said, their key products are cucumbers and tomatoes. They do more tomatoes than cucumbers, but what they realized from looking at the market and looking at their cash flow and their drive to improve their cash flow was that it takes them 3 months from growing to harvesting. When you look at tomatoes, right? With tomatoes, it's 3 months growing to harvesting. But with cucumbers, it's 1 month. So in the period that it takes to grow one lot of tomatoes, they can do 3 batches of cucumbers. And so although tomatoes might give them higher margins, although tomatoes may give them, may have higher demand overall, cucumbers give them a more regular inflow of cash, a steadier inflow of cash. So ARDHI has increased their production of cucumbers by 30%, just to improve the inflow of cash from tomatoes, from cucumbers. They've increased production of cucumbers by 30%. The other thing that they did was to look at their product delivery model. They are looking at developing new channels. They are reducing their reliance on the supermarkets. They identify that the supermarkets are not located in residential areas. So if there is a lockdown, what we saw in the last lockdown in Ghana was that during the lockdown, people were still allowed to go out to buy food. Now, if you're going out during a lockdown to buy food, you're not going to drive all the way to a mall, which is where the supermarkets, ShopRite and Game would be located. You're not going to drive all the way to a mall to shop. You drive to a neighborhood shop. So ARDHI has started looking at those neighborhood shops, looking at farmers market and shops, grocery shops that are closer to consumers. They also are looking at the aggregators, as I mentioned earlier, and the traders. And then they're also exploring selling direct to consumers. They are putting measures in place so that they can sell directly to consumers, going around the middlemen. Next slide, please. Regarding their cash flow, they also did a number of things similar to AMSCO. They looked at their product mix. Like I said, the product mix, they're looking at the delivery channel. All of that was to improve their cash flow, to bring in revenue. They also are talking to a number of potential equity partners. That is also to bring in cash flow. They have a policy of no capital expenditure from operations. They will not finance any capital expenditure from operations. If that is to happen, it has to get approval at the very highest level, which would be at the level of the board. They have also reduced their budgets for outsourced functions. They've spoken to the marketing provider, for example, the vendor, and they have managed to reduce their budget for that. Then they have put in place a plan to adjust the staff contracts if necessary. If it comes to that, they already have a plan in place to adjust staff contracts. They've classified their staff as to who are the critical staff and non-critical staff, and they have a plan in place to address that if that becomes necessary. So, sorry, next slide. So what can we learn from AMSCO and ARDHI? For every business, SME, large business, you have to review your service delivery model to ensure that you are meeting emerging customer trends. And there are a number of questions you should ask yourself in order to do this. How can you sell to customers who are not able or who are not willing to visit your premises? A lot of businesses are used to customers coming to them. How are you selling to them now? How are you going to make or receive payments while you observe social distancing norms, the guidelines, the norms that have been implemented? In a lot of markets, cash is still king, as in people still make payment by cash. In some countries, like in Kenya, mobile money is very, very commonly used. In other countries, mobile money exists, but it's not that commonly used. I think that the mobile money will explode at this time. I think that it's a way to make payments without physically touching anybody. I mean, even if you use a credit card, you are going to touch somebody. You're going to touch something that they touched, but mobile money is going to be a very nice and easy way to do that. You also need to look at other industries. What ideas are there from other industries that you can adapt to your business? If I go back to ARDHI, ARDHI looking at selling directly to customers, yes, a number of firms do that, but ARDHI is looking at a delivery model. That model is something that is more common in the restaurant industry, where you have them deliver food to you. But ARDHI is looking at delivering groceries to customers in their homes. And the customer will actually just pay the farm price, that's the wholesale price for the groceries, and pay for the delivery. So it will be much cheaper for the customer. Then you've also got to look at your business model. What assumptions do you have about your business that are outdated? And that's something you've got to do and take some very hard decisions about your business model. You've got to be very frank to yourself about whether your business model is outdated. My gut feeling is that most business models are outdated. Next slide, please. The second lesson is that we must rationalize our service offerings and focus on the products that will generate the best cash inflows. Again, a number of questions that you should ask yourself. Which products give you the most steady and reliable cash inflow? It's not which one gives you the most profit, which one gives you the most steady and reliable cash inflow. Which of your products do your customers buy most often? And which of your in-demand products have the fastest throughput? So when you stock a product, how quickly does it get off the shelf? Does it create more shelf space? You've got to ask yourself that and focus on those products. Those will be your cash cows. Focus on your cash cows. The next slide. The third lesson from AMSCO and from ARDHI is to look carefully for opportunities to grab new market share or to go into new markets. But please, please, please do not be rash about it. Do not rush into it. It could be painful if you rush into it. How can you differentiate your business from other competitors? Now, these questions that I'm asking are questions that you need to take away from here. And again, the slides will be circulated. They'll be available to you. So you have these questions. Ask yourself these questions. Discuss it with your clients and with your partners and with your employees. So how can you differentiate your business from your competitors? What can you offer to draw in new customers? Next. Now, the reality, as I pointed out, is that a lot of companies will fold up. Your weaker competitors will fold up. So, as weaker competitors fold up, can you step in and buy their inventory? Typically, such inventory should be sold cheaply. So, can you step in and buy this inventory cheaply? Can you draw customers from your weakest competitors? Again, it's a competition, right? So, how can you draw customers from your weakest competitors? And then keep an eye open for opportunities that will pop up in your industry or in related industries or in related geographies, areas next to you or close to you. Look out for those opportunities, analyze those opportunities carefully. And if you can take advantage of those opportunities without incurring significant cash outlays, go ahead. And then finally, and again, Kimberly mentioned this, I think, network. It's a very low cost way of marketing yourself, marketing your business, and finding business opportunities. Network. And then Finally, final lesson. Next slide, please. The final lesson is about cash flows, of course. Your focus at this time is to achieve a positive cash flow. How do you do that? Look at your inflows and ask yourself, how can you get your customers to pay you more money more quickly? How can you get your customers to prepay for orders, or to pay pay deposits for orders? How can you get your customers, or can you get a partner, as ARDHI is doing, can you get a partner to inject new capital into the business? You need to then look at your outflows. Next bullet. Look at your outflows as well. And start with your expenses. What expenses can you reduce? What expenses can you cut out completely? What capital expenditure can be cut out or delayed? When it comes to your expenses, there are certain expenses that a lot of small businesses would have, like buying newspapers on a daily basis. Is that absolutely necessary for the business? Cut that out. So look at every little expense and justify that expense to your business, and be brutally frank to yourself about the necessity for it. When it comes to capital expenditure, if you need to buy assets, fixed assets, your laptops, etc., can you buy used items instead of buying new items? If you need to buy computers for a computer, can you buy a refurbished computer instead of buying a new computer? Look at how you can save money, reduce your cash outflow. Can you get better terms of credit from your current vendors? Or if they cannot, can you get better terms of credit from new vendors? You've got to explore that. How can you reduce your inventory without hurting the customer experience? Now, your inventory will be your stock sitting on your shelves. If it's sitting on your shelves, it means your money is locked up in that. So you want to reduce your inventory, but you don't want to run out of stock so that when customers come, you don't have anything to sell to them. So you must maintain some stock, but what is your stock level? You've got to look into that and understand how you can reduce your inventory without hurting the customer experience. And remember this, if you run out of cash, you're dead. You're not making it. So your focus is to achieve a positive cash flow. Next slide. Then, okay, sorry. The final point was middlemen. To look at if you can go around middlemen. If there are middlemen in your value chain, can you go around middlemen in your purchasing or in your sales? And I'll take questions.
Kofi, thank you so much. That was such a detailed presentation with a lot of practical tips and how-tos, just the way that our audience has requested. So we're so grateful for that. I have one question, just a bit of a prediction from your side, Kofi. We've had a lot of inquiries from those who deliver services. Obviously, you know, hospitality sector has been hard hit by this particular episode, and I think it will be the same for many, many months, if not years to come. And also commercial property owners. What are your predictions about the use of space for places like hotels that may be lying empty for years to come? And also, secondly, for service providers, in terms of how they could maybe pivot to you know, survive through the other side of this thing. Well, what are your predictions and observations on that?
Okay, let me touch on service providers first. I think Kimberly actually touched on that. She talked about that, but let me just add a bit to that. I think that with service providers, you've got to look at which of your services sell the most. Look for your cash cow. But also beyond that, keep an eye out on other industries that are related to yours. If you don't have the skills you probably will not have the skills in-house to go into a completely different industry. But look for opportunities. Kimberly said that this is you're basically going back to square one to look at your business and go back to your business plan. What is the customer demand? Does it exist for what I'm doing? Or should I be looking at something else? Look at that. If you look at your industry and your industry is going to take a hit for a long time, then you probably need to start looking at leaving. You probably may have to get out of that industry or get out of that service and look for a new service. Because the reality is that some industries are going to shrink incredibly. The hospitality segment is one of those. If you are into travel and tours, I really cannot readily think of of what to do to maintain a travel and tour business, other than focusing on local travel, local tourism. Okay, but even local tourism is going to be hit as long as we have lockdowns. So certain industries are going to be very hard hit, and those are the high touch industries that I talk about. Hotels are hit. I mean, they've been hit. Lots of hotels are lying empty. I mean, we spoke last week, you and I, Amma, and you have a hotel. So yes, I understand what you're going through. Hotels are going to be hard hit, and if you look at huge luxury hotels, they are probably going to be hit a lot more. I think in Ghana we had not Movenpick, Kempinski, saying that they were closing 4 floors. They were shutting down 4 floors of the hotel. And the problem with hotels is that you have a huge infrastructure that is there. So what do you do with that? You can probably look at converting some of that into office space, if that is possible, office space. But again, you would need to price appropriately, because companies, a lot of companies are sitting already in office spaces. So why would I leave my office space to come into this new one? So you would have to really price appropriately to attract businesses to move in there. But it could be very interesting for startup businesses who need just one office. That could be quite interesting. You could also look at supporting the COVID efforts of the governments, which is that can the hotel be used as an isolation center, or can it be used as can the rooms be given out to people, to nurses, doctors who have to travel long distances and who are working in the neighborhood but have to travel long distances? Can you reach some type of arrangement where they can bank there for the night at heavily reduced prices? Again, the point at this time is not for you to be looking at profit, but for you to be looking at your cash flow. Exactly. So at a very nominal amount, can you be looking at how you can open your hotel up to different uses? Because the hotel industry, as it is now, is non-existent. Yeah. The travel industry, as it is now, is non-existent. Okay, so what else can you do? If you have a tour company, vehicles, what do you do with your vehicles that are parked? Are you able to use that with some government agency, some hospital to transport staff, etc.? You've just got to look at doing things differently.
Sure. I like the fact that a lot of people are speaking about more localized economies and production. I think that is definitely going to be the way of the future, and it's something that I've been talking about for a couple of years now, but it's good to see these conversations really taking off. So I think, Olivia, we'll take a few questions from participants, and then we can maybe wrap up, because we're at 12:30 now, so just going over time. Kofi, if you could bear with us for a few minutes for a few questions. Great, thank you.
I have one from Rodney, whose question is, many of Ghana businesses are small, service oriented and customer facing. What are your thoughts on survival of these traditional business models in Ghana, since they operate in contrast to proposed social engagement policies?
So again, it will depend on where the businesses are. If the businesses that are in the lower income neighborhoods will probably still survive, because people will still come out, and I don't see a great amount of delivery happening in, say, a slum area. I don't see a great amount of delivery happening there. So you probably will survive at a much lower level. The challenge, though, would be, how do you get your supplies in? Because they have to go out and buy, and if there are lockdowns, and if the supply chain is affected, if the market ladies are not able to get their goods, how are you going to get your supplies in? Undoubtedly, there's going to be an impact on food prices. Prices will go up. And so that's also going to affect them. I think that the businesses that are in the more upscale neighborhoods might actually tend to suffer a little more. So if you have the ladies selling food at the corner in an upscale neighborhood in Ghana, I would imagine a place like East Legon or Airport Residential Area. In Kenya, I'll be thinking of Muthaiga, etc. The lady who sells foodstuffs in a corner. People are going to become a little more health conscious. So would I want to buy from that lady, or would I be prepared to pay a little more to have my food delivered by some aggregator somewhere? Or would I prefer to buy from a company like ARDHI, a farm like ARDHI that would deliver straight to my home and reduce my interaction? So I think it's going to vary. A number of businesses, everybody is going to struggle to a certain extent, but if you are able to flip your model, if you ask yourself the questions that I listed, if you ask yourself those questions, if you are able to flip your business model, pivot your business to take advantage, because there are opportunities, right? Whilst everybody will be affected. Kimberly made the point, which I strongly agree to, that in times of crisis, there are opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a number of businesses that were started in times of crisis. The Great Depression in the United States, 1929 to 1933. KFC was founded during that time. Okay, and KFC is now a huge company, turning over $2.6 billion last year. Okay, so there will be opportunities. Now you've got to identify those opportunities.
Thank you, Kofi. That's very, very poignant. Thank you so much. We've got quite a number of questions, so I'm going to maybe rally through one or two, and then we are going to close. This is from Irene Lamte, and it's regarding employee contracts in terms of reviewing them. What key points should be considered? The recession will affect them too. How do we renegotiate whilst maintaining their loyalty?
I think that firstly, I'm not a lawyer, so let me make that point clear. And I am definitely not a labor lawyer. But what I would recommend when it comes to contracts is talk to a lawyer first, so that you understand your legal position. Now, your legal position is not necessarily the position you must take in any negotiation discussion with your employees. You've got to try and take a position. Hopefully, you'll be able to take a position that is better than your legal position. You've got to look at your employees. Your employees have shown you loyalty over a certain period of time. You don't want to cut them out all at once. But again, it depends on the situation on the ground. The one thing I would recommend is you've got to talk to your employees. Be open, maintain open communication with your employees. Let them understand the impact of the crisis, the situation on your business. Your employees also, very importantly, will have ideas. So you've got to tap into their ideas. Now, the last thing you want is for your employees to be uncomfortable, wondering if I'm going to lose my job, and then you come in to talk to them about ideas, what ideas they have. But look, make it clear to them, this is the position the company is in. We are going to try and help this company to survive. We are going to try and retain your as many contracts as possible. We will discuss with you every step of the way what is happening, and be open to them. And there will come a time when you might have to adjust some contracts. Either you reduce salaries, again, having a discussion with them. You can't do that unilaterally. You would have to reach an agreement with them. Can you reduce salaries? There may be some employees that you let go at a point. If things get really bad, you might let go of some employees, but you've got to try and assure them, if you do that, when things turn around, you're the first person I'm coming back to. You know, you've got to. I saw recently a school that sent, just this morning or last night, a school that sent out a circular. They are letting go of some of their teachers because they don't have that much work. And what they are saying is that when things turn around, those teachers would be invited to reapply for their jobs. I think that's disastrous. These guys have worked for you for a long time. If you have to let them go because the situation is bad, when things turn around, do they have to apply and compete with everybody else for jobs with you? You know, you've got to show some loyalty. Let your employees see the loyalty that you have with them. So you've got to try communicate a lot with your employees. Be open.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, definitely people first if you can. I think communication.
Yeah.
And like, Kimberly said, regular updates with your team as much as you can.
Yes.
And just be very frank and transparent. I find that that's been the most refreshing thing from this thing.
It is.
People, especially leaders, SME owners, people tend to be very uncomfortable having frank and open discussions. Culturally, we're not very transparent. But I think this is really a learning curve for all of us to be just more open about, how we deal with the situation as a collective, because they're the ones who are going to serve you when things return back to normal, whatever the new normal will look like. They are the very ones that you will need to really
the other one,
retrain and reprioritize the direction that your company is going to go in and grow from there. So let's take care of our people.
I think importantly to your employees also probably interact more with your customers than you do. Exactly. So they are the ones who can tell you what customer buying patterns are. Yeah. They are the ones who can tell you where customer demand is shifting towards. So you've got to tap into your employees' face. That's got to be your primary concern. How do you tap into them?
And
Kimberly
also their needs as well.
And their needs.
Their needs, like what's happening in their communities, what's happening, it's actually quite open. When you speak to them, you realize a whole other swathe of problems that are also opportunities potentially for you as a business owner.
They are worried about themselves. They're worried about their families. They're worried about whether how they're going to pay school fees. They're worried about everything. And you don't want to be the one adding the whole situation of, I'm going to fire somebody. So you've got to really communicate and put your employees first and put them ahead of a lot. Right. And also, if you're taking tough decisions, like if you're going to cut salaries, etc., if you're going to ask people to work longer hours for less money, start with yourself. Cut your salary first. Yeah. Start working longer hours at a lower salary. Yeah. Before you start talking about doing that to your employees. Do that to yourself first.
Great. I think we are running out of time. There's still one or two questions that have come through. But I think what we will do now is, if everyone has any further questions, please email them to us. If you register today, then we'll be able to kind of share the presentation. And also if you register, we'll be able to have your contact details to reach back out to you if you have specific questions. If you need to email us, you can email us at scaleupprogram@gmail.com. And we'll be able to share the presentations from both speakers with you in the next coming days. But I think we're running out of time. I want to just say thank you to our speakers, and thank you for you guys staying with us for the full hour and a bit. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate.
We have another session next week, same time, new speakers. Similar topics, but we'll expand upon different, areas as the speakers feel is appropriate to their background. So please keep abreast of our activities on social media and on our events page. There's a lot more to come in this way that's very, very practical. Kofi, thank you so much for all the insights and details.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
We'll definitely keep this going.
We will.
Definitely. Thank you.
Right, guys. Thank you so much.
All.
Have a great day. Speak to you all very soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.